Fitness tests are tests that can determine how good you are at a certain component of skill. It determines someone's physical fitness and health.
Using them as a coach, it allows us to see how well you cope with the physical demands and to see where you are. For instance, if you have a certain level of cardiovascular endurance, we can test this by doing the bleep test. Some advantages are that you can see an individual's progress. For example, when doing a 30-metre sprint test, if an individual was to get 15 seconds to begin with at the beginning of the term, and then at the end of the term they got 12 seconds, you can see how well they've progressed throughout the term. You can also target people's weaknesses. You can see from doing any tests, you can compare them to normative data to see how well or how bad they're doing at a certain skill, and then obviously target the ones where the normative data say that they are poor at. Also, they are quick and easy to do. You can do them when in training sessions.
Some disadvantages of fitness testing are that they can take a long time. So, for example, the bleep test, depending on the athlete's endurance, it could take over 10 minutes as they have to run backwards, forwards multiple times. Also, some aren't very specific to the sport. For example, the grip strength test. Not all athletes will need strength in their arms, so this only determines the strength of the forearm. So, for example, a high jumper would need strength in their legs rather than in their arms, so this test would be irrelevant for them.
An example of a fitness test is a sit and reach test. This measures the flexibility on your lower back and your hamstring muscles. In this test, you sit on the floor with your legs out straight and your feet flat on the side of the sit and reach box.
Some advantages of this test are that it doesn't require much space. So you only need a little space that you can fit a box in, so you could do it in the corner of a room even. That you also don't need much equipment to be able to perform this test, as all you need is a wall and a box. You need to take your shoes off when performing it, and you need a partner to read out your score. Also, it is easy to see progress. So you can do it at the beginning of a season, then at the end of the season, or just to be able to compare the scores, which are easily read off the box because it's just a simple centimetres.
Disadvantages of the sit and reach test is that you need a partner to help you in doing this test. When sitting and reaching, when touching the box with your fingertips, the touch is quite instant, so that you won't really be able to see what score you got yourself. So you'll need a partner to show you what score you got. As well as this, you need to warm up before doing the test. This is because when you stretch, more synovial fluid gets around to your joints, and therefore it makes your joints become more mobile. As well as this, it's not sport specific. This only tests your hamstring and lower back flexibility. An example of this is tennis. They need a lot of flexibility in their arms when reaching out to get to reach the tennis ball. They don't particularly need hamstring and lower back flexibility, so this isn't sport specific.
The frequency at which you have to test the sit and reach depends on the sport that you're performing. So a gymnast would need to test their flexibility more frequently than a netball player, for instance, as a gymnast needs more flexibility due to the skills that they perform and the movement they need around their joint. For example, when they're doing splits, they'll definitely need hamstring strength and lower back strength to be able to perform that. Whereas a netball player only will need less flexibility, as they might need to reach up to catch a ball, or they need to bend down to pick up a ball, so this just needs less flexibility around their joints.
A test used to measure your cardiovascular endurance is the bleep test. This is when you continuously run from one line to another line, and you need to get to the line over the other side before you hear the bleep. An advantage of the bleep test is that it's very low cost. All you need is a good facility, an app, and cones. You can do the test in big groups as well. So if you have like a class of 30, you could probably do the test in 2 sets because it's easy to do, and you can do them in big groups, so you can get it over and done with quicker. It's easy to set up and perform. All you need to do is measure out 20 metres, put cones on the line where 20 metres are, and that's all you need to do.
Some disadvantages are that you need a lot of space. So you'd need a whole sports hall or a large area outside, because the run consists of 20 metres run in between. So the cones are 20 metres far apart, so you'd need at least that much space. It also can take a long time depending on the athlete's endurance levels currently, so it could take over 10 minutes if the athlete is long, which would take up most of your session. Also, it's not necessarily sport specific, as there's not a lot of sports where you would continuously run backwards and forwards. For example, in football or in any sort of sports, you would have to stop and start when running. So 1 second you might be sprinting down the pitch, and another point where the ball's down the other end of the pitch, you'd be stationary. So you wouldn't have to be continuously running, although you still need endurance for these sports. They would perform the bleep test in pre-season training. The coach would assess the athlete's level of fitness, so they will know how long they can sustain a good performance when in a competition, depending on which sport also. So if you endurance train specifically, you would do the bleep test more frequently, so if you can see an increase, you'll know whether to change your training program or not.
A test to measure power is the vertical jump test. This is when you're side onto a wall and reach up with your closest hand to the wall. You then jump and the top of your fingertips are recorded with how far you jump.
A couple of advantages to this test is that it doesn't require a lot of equipment. All you need is a wall and a poster that measures how high you jump. It's quick and easy to set up and perform. This is because it can be done anywhere. You can take the poster down, move it to somewhere else, and it takes a couple of seconds to perform the actual test itself and repeat it time and time again. It's also easy to see progress because it's numbers, so you can compare it to normative data, and also if you started 1 month on a score of 15 centimetres, then by the end of the next month after training, if it went up to 20, it shows a clear difference. However, there are some disadvantages to this. It's not very sport specific. For example, hockey, you don't really require a lot of hamstring and sort of power from the legs as such. You sort of use more upper body strength, so the test isn't really valid. You also need a partner to tell you your results. This is because when you're doing the test, you don't look up as such. You look forward, so you can't see where your hands touch the wall. Also, it's not very accurate because it's such a quick, explosive movement. It's quite hard to read the results and react to what happened.
You would do the vertical jump test in pre-season training, as the coach would assess the athlete's level of power they can generate. This is to be able to see if they need to progress and work on their power. Also, they will repeat the vertical jump test more if your sport involves more power in your legs. So for example, as a basketballer is always jumping up to get rebounds, they would perform this test as they would specifically train more than a tennis player who doesn't need to be able to generate as much power as they don't need to jump in their sport.
A test used to measure speed is the 30-metre sprint test. This tests your speed over a set distance. A partner will be recording your time for you. So some advantages to this is there's not a lot of equipment needed. All you need is a bit of space that's 30 metres long, and some markers to mark out where the start and finish is, and a stopwatch or timer. It's easy to set up and perform. As I said, all you need is distance 30 metres, and then you're probably running for no more than 7 to 10 seconds. It's also a very quick test. This can be done anywhere, anytime, and repeated and done within a matter of minutes.
Just some disadvantages of the 30-metre sprint test is that it shows your reaction time rather than your acceleration time. For example, in like a normal sprint, the first usually 30 metres is your reaction time because you're not actually up to your maximum speed at that point. So it's testing your reaction time rather than your acceleration time. As well as this, you need like a biggish space to perform. Like 30 metres is quite big, so you'd need like a sports hall or to go outside to perform the test. And as well as this, you need a partner because you need someone to say go, and you need to be someone needs to record the time in which you do the 30-metre sprint test in.
You would perform the 30-metre sprint test in pre-season training to assess if the athlete's speed needs to be improved, so you'd be able to know whether they need to do more specific speed training during their programme. Also, it would depend on the sport. For example, a football player would need to test their 30-metre sprint ability more because they need to be quicker than their opposition to gain possession of the ball, rather than a badminton player who still needs to be quick, but they don't necessarily need to sprint 30 metres in their sport. They mainly rely on their power they can exert and their reaction time for their sport.